floating through the air. The pain I felt is paid for, all is said and done. Oh, I am restricted, fixed upon the web. I need to kick the habit that my mind is breathing in. Break out, I've got to see. Spent all my life holding all of it closely. I played it innocent, a feel of discontent. I'm finally facing it all, fearless. Burning the bridge that keeps us. I'm here and I'm feeling exaggerated, that's what you assume. The story's over now, I must conclude. I am conflicted, watching where I step still, hanging in the balance. Not the life I want to live, I want to take it all. Standing tall, fear I've weighed the person you are. Oh, break out, I've got to see. Spent all my life holding all of it closely. I played it innocent, a feel of discontent. I'm finally facing it all, fearless.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Blue Podcast here on the Golden Show. And as we literally were playing the intro, Romelu Lukaku has just been announced as a Chelsea player on Twitter, literally as the intro was playing. So Romelu Lukaku is officially announced at Chelsea. So you guys were all seeing this on the Friday when that's the Thursday. But anyway, Lukaku's at Chelsea. Here we go. Anyway, today is a very special episode of the podcast. It is a Manchester United special with two Manchester United fans. They're going to be grading, debating, and arguing probably over some opinions of some Manchester United players. Maybe some good, maybe some bad, maybe some in between. So making his debut from the Red, White, and Blue show, he literally likes every single sport known to man in the world, no matter if it's in the UK, if it's in America, or some sport in Jamaica we've never heard of. It is Conor. So how you doing, Conor?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I just grew up watching everything I could and have picked up now in the last couple of years a couple more sports to where you're probably right. I pretty much follow most of the sports that are played around the world.
And then obviously I've got George, my co-host, who's back for another episode where this time he's in his specialty, he's in his area, he's in his grind. This is Manchester United. So obviously, George, how you doing?
Very good, Josh. Yep, really looking forward to the show. Obviously, to discuss all things Manchester United with Conor, and let's get into it.
So the best thing about this is that I get to stay out of this. I don't really have to say anything other than name a player and let these two talk away. So I'm going to start off with probably a couple of the controversial players before getting into maybe some of the more basic ones. So the first one is the very interesting one, probably the biggest question mark over the Manchester United team going into I think he's going to start Saturday, but obviously a big question, will he remain the starter during the season? It is obviously Mr. David De Gea. Obviously replaced by Dean Henderson during the season last year, but then regained his spot. Though obviously did not see a single penalty against Villarreal. Also shown, obviously Tuchel made the change yesterday. Maybe could also bring on Henderson. I'll let George obviously maybe explain his vision on that. But Conor, I'll start off with you. What is your personal opinion on David De Gea?
Club legend. I mean, it's very much something where you don't like to throw around the club legend status often unless they've really done a lot for them. But De Gea has been here for pretty much the shittiest years of the club. If you're looking at the past 2 decades, he's been here for the worst span of it, and has been throughout it all one of the best keepers in the world. Yes, I do agree that I think Henderson should have probably been brought on for the penalty kicks, but when you look when you get down to it, De Gea has earned his right to continue to be at this club, and I think he's going to continue to be David De Gea. Do I wish he would come off of his line more for crosses and things like that? Yeah, but when it comes down to it, he's still one of the best shot stoppers in the world.
On David De Gea, I think it's very difficult because, to be honest with you, obviously your version of what a legend is could be very different from what mine is, and obviously in the same way as absolutely anyone, because there's no sort of definitive definition of what a legend is. There's no doubt that David De Gea has been a superb player for us. Obviously, he's now completed 10 years, in fact, with the club. And as you've spoken about, there have been some of the worst years, and there have been years in there where he's won consecutive Player of the Years, which has shown how poor the outfield players have been and how much of a saviour David De Gea has been over that time. A few years ago, he was the best keeper in the world. Had an unparalleled level of shot stopping, and he was probably the only keeper in the world who at that juncture could win games by himself, just by obviously being able to save shots that no one else could. He was absolutely phenomenal for those. As we all may all recollect, probably the greatest goalkeeping performance in Premier League history was in that 3-1 win at the Emirates a few seasons ago, where he literally, and there was a few saves in there. One was from obviously Josh's new idol, Romelu Lukaku, trying to score an own goal. That was one of the most amazing saves that you'll likely see when the free kick came in and Lukaku bounced off him, his trampoline touch, and De Gea managed to claw it off the line, as well as obviously the double save as well. So David De Gea, then there've been many more amazing saves that we've seen. What I would say though about De Gea is that he is now obviously as it stands currently, he is the highest paid player at the club. And it's whether, for me, it's whether he still deserves that. Is he, or has he gone past his peak? And interestingly enough, I think with goalkeepers, they do tend to plateau and obviously, start their decline at the same sort of age as outfield players do, which is sort of the age that David Gea, I think he's now coming up to. I think he's sort of 30 or coming up to that age, and he is now, I feel like he is slowly, a couple of seasons ago, I think last season he wasn't too bad. I think he and Henderson, obviously, it really did help having Henderson behind him. But I think for the couple of seasons since the 2018 World Cup, when he had an absolute nightmare against Cristiano Ronaldo in that opening game against Portugal, it seemed like his confidence was shot. And we saw, I think he made the most errors leading to goals over the couple of seasons, obviously prior to the last one. He does now seem to have stabilised. Last season, I think he wasn't too bad, but for me, it is a case of whether he's worth that money. When I think that Dean Henderson is, I don't see that there's much. I don't even think the most ardent De Gea fan would say that there's too much between him and Henderson now. And that's my sort of point, is that obviously you've got Henderson on a much lower wage, and I know it shouldn't always be about that, because that's sort of playing into the Glazers' hands, but there is a case in actual fact now. I've had a greater chance to think about and reflect on the season, obviously with a couple of months since it finished. I think there's a question mark over both goalkeepers and whether either of them are good enough to be properly the number one goalkeeper in such a way as that, with this sort of more where it's playing out from the back. Are either of those goalkeepers that good at playing out from the back? And I don't necessarily think they are. And I've seen, I think even Jordan Pickford, who excelled at the Euros, showed that you do have to be good with your feet now. And I don't necessarily think that either of them are. And De Gea, he can't, at his age, he probably won't be able to learn that either. So for me, De Gea is probably, because you have to sort of pick one. And I think for me, based on the wages and based on the fact that talent-wise, I don't see that there's much difference between the two to explain that higher wage. I think it's a big mistake we've retained De Gea.
I agree.
That wage.
I mean, I agree. I think Henderson should be our starter. I just think it'll be De Gea, of course, because of the whole COVID incident going on right now. I do agree that Henderson should be the starter. De Gea turns 31 in November, and obviously it's not FIFA where they start declining at 30. You know, it's keepers like you look at Edwin van der Sar, who went into his 40s and played top level keeping. You know, you can't always judge by their age how they're going to go. But I do think at this point in time, Henderson has kind of shown that he can kind of take, and I think with how we play, it's better to have Henderson because we do need a keeper that comes off the line and will be able to come out for the corners and come out even for those. I don't remember what game it was, but there was one game where there was 2 balls over the top to the striker, and Lindelof is, huffing and puffing because he's slow as absolute shite and can't keep up with the striker. And heavens above, here comes Henderson coming out and sweeper keeping and smashes the ball away and saves what could have been easily a one on nobody against the keeper that could have ended up in 2 goals. So I think I'd never see De Gea do stuff like that. That's something we need right now from our keeper. I don't think we should be playing from the back in the first place. I think with the players we have, especially Cavani being up there at the striker position, we have people that we can have to where if we knock the ball forward, he could just nod it on or, retain the ball and get it going. But yeah, I think De Gea has been great, but the wages are incredibly high. And I think Henderson just fits our style of play more now as a keeper.
I think Henderson still can improve, though. So obviously, when you talked about that sweeper keeper, that is something that he does do well. And as you said, De Gea probably wouldn't do that. But even then, there are times where Henderson does come out like, it seems like he almost wants to force himself on every occasion. So he's not quite got the right decision making to do it correctly every time. If you look, for example, at, and I know again it's a bit silly to name probably one of the best keepers of the last 10 or so years in Manuel Neuer, who is probably the best example of a sweeper keeper. But he obviously is very good at decision making when to come out and when not to, and that's what Henderson I think does have to learn. But again, he's in terms of the age thing, he is young enough to kind of start to learn it. So yeah, I think for me, I probably would, and in essence, though, what in sort of conclusion, I think because you can't really have long term, you can't really have both keepers, both almost like first choice keepers at the club. I don't think, because neither of them are going to be happy to be sort of like the reserve keeper. I think, and I don't necessarily think it would make sense to sort of keep swapping them around the way that Ollie did last season. I don't think that's feasible long term. So I think one of them's going to have to go. And I think it will be De Gea. But obviously, like I said, because of the wages on, that's going to be exceptionally difficult because most clubs can't afford it.
It would have been PSG if it wasn't for Donnarumma. I think, honestly, he'd be off to PSG this summer if it wasn't for the fact that Gianluigi came from Milan for free.
But the thing is that, obviously, the issue with De Gea is that he's on that very large wage. And as I said, the few clubs that could afford that, they're going to get a better keeper. Do you see what I mean? So obviously, exactly as you said, like Donnarumma for PSG, he is much better. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's much better than De Gea now, and that's the issue: is that you've got a player who's not worth that amount, and the teams that could afford him would not pay him that.
He'd have to take a wage cut.
Yeah,
and I think we could see one thing. I thought of, especially with bringing in Tom Heaton, was loaning one of them out, whether that be De Gea or whether that be Henderson. Loaning one of them out, I would say De Gea, just because I think it'd be interesting to loan him out to a team that would be interested in needing a keeper, and that's something where he could go there for a year, impress the team while he's there, enough to hopefully have the one to go in to buy him. And De Gea's gone, I like the club, I like where I'm at, and he's willing to take a wage cut as well. And especially with him going on loan, we could offer to take half of his wage, which we can afford easily, and it'll make it more enticing for that team taking him on loan to be like, we're only having to pay half his wage. All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, very, very good opening debate on David De Gea. You've already kind of covered Henderson, so we'll not go there. And then the next person I'm going to ask you for the absolute laws and bans, Mr. Lee Grant, signing a new contract extension with Manchester United. Conor,
he's a coach. Even the club knows that he's not a player. He's a coach. That's what he's been brought on to be. And even the other goalies have said he's been brought on, been capped to pretty much be the goalkeeper coach. He works with the goalkeepers behind the scene, and fair enough to him. I mean, if that's his job, then I think it's great because I don't think he's too terrible of a goalkeeper coach. I think we saw some strides of improvement from Henderson when you saw Grant kind of shift into that role. So as long as he's a coach, and I know that we've played him in the preseason, but it's preseason. Nobody's come back yet, so I understand playing him. But you could just tell how bad he is by the halves he was playing in preseason. But if he's here as a coach, my feathers aren't really that ruffled if he's just here as a coach. I think, it's the same with Juan Mata. We're just waiting for him to get his coaching badges for him to become a coach for United. So I'm not too upset.
I don't really have too many because obviously we scarcely ever really see Lee Grant. I mean, the only time that I've really seen him, as you said, you've obviously got the pre-season things, but also holding up as a board to indicate, I think it was some stoppage time or a substitution. That's the only time that I've seen him doing any sort of work. What I would say is that it's, eventually, as you said, it's like the sort of coaching. Hopefully, we are going to see some improvement and more noticeable with the goalkeepers, even moving forward into this season. I think, it's going to be extremely interesting. But I think he's going to be very much a bit part. I'm going to see him eventually sort of move more into officially into the proper coaching role. So just hope he can improve and help with Dean Henderson and David De Gea. He's not going to get any game time during the actual season unless the worst happens and something really unfortunate happens too.
We lose all three goalkeepers at once. That's the only way I see him playing. And even then, I'd honestly see us calling up Kovar from the academy before we actually play Lee Grant, to be honest.
Okay, we'll move on to the first outfield player. We'll go for our backup option at left back first. We're going to start off with Alex Tellus. Conor, where do you rate Alex Tellus, the backup to Shaw Roberto?
He's the backup to my favorite player. So, I mean, for me, I like him. I thought he was a great signing, and he's ended up being fruitful, and he's done exactly what his job description kind of was coming into the team, which was make Shaw work. Put some pressure on Luke Shaw to bring him back to his old form of when he was back at Southampton in his first couple of years before the injury when he was here. And he's done that. He's done his job. Do I think he could play a bit better defensively? Yeah, but he's not a defensive left back. We know that. He's more, in my opinion, fit for a left wing back if we ever to play a five at the back, which there are games where I could see us playing a five at the back and it working very well. But, I'm not too upset. I was pissed when it was rumored he was going on loan to Roma because I think having him there as the backup for Luke Shaw is great because, it's always great to have a backup because you never know what's going to happen. You could have a freak injury happen to anybody. We saw it with Raul Jimenez at Wolves last year. They didn't really have a backup. They had Fabio Silva as backup, but he was not near the quality of Raul Jimenez. Jimenez goes down for the entire year with a head injury, and Wolves sunk because they didn't have a competent striker up front. So I think Tellus is perfect. I don't have anything against him really.
So I really, really do like Alex Tellus. I thought, and obviously we'll probably get into Shaw later on, so I won't sort of go into that subject. But I think, as you said, he has done exactly what he came into to do. In many ways, you almost thought he would become the first choice left back at that juncture. I feel because he was incredibly highly rated. Playing in Portugal. Incredibly, I also think he's very offensive minded, as you sort of alluded to, and I've seen on the occasion that he's not played too often, probably actually less than I would want him to. I still think he could, and obviously we'll probably get into more of Ollie's, or at least my issues with Ollie, which includes rotation or lack thereof. But Alex Tellus, I think, is a really great player. I think it's always good to have strength and depth. I think if you look at Man City, who are the sort of team that everyone wants to catch, they've almost got at least two, maybe even three players for each position, such as the amount of money they've spent and obviously the amount of quality they've brought in. So it's important that we do, look to retain Alex Tellus. And I think offensively, he's been, really, really good when he's played. Some absolutely wicked crosses, free kicks and corners. And I think also, just again to touch on his impact on Luke Shaw, I think Luke Shaw's attacking output and ability has been greatly improved by having Alex Tellus at the club. I think that's very extremely noticeable. The level of crossing, the level of the set pieces as well. He's definitely been in training with Alex Tellus, who has been instructing, because a lot of the stuff, and in fact all of it, if you look at Luke Shaw's attacking output prior to this season, or last season I should say, it was absolutely terrible. And I think I strongly believe Alex Tellus has been coaching him into being a far more potent force going forward. And then defensively, as you said, there may be small issues, but actually, to be honest, I think he actually defensively is quite good. I think again often on the goals that we've conceded this season, or last season I should say now as it is, I think it's mostly to do with the centre backs, and we'll get on to them at another juncture. So I really do think Alex Tellus is a really great player, and like I said, I'd like to see more of him. In the season coming forward.
Okay, on to the another bag of fullback that you currently have on your books, Brandon Williams. Conor?
Yeah, we have him on the books, but it does not look like he will be with the team very much longer, which I'm extremely happy about. I think he could end up being a very good player for us, especially with his utility ability to be left and right back. That ability to back up both fullback spots is something I think you always need a utility player that can play pretty much. We saw it with, with a couple players like Darren Fletcher and, players of the past where they were able to play multiple positions. And I mean, Darren Fletcher, I swear he played pretty much every single position, but goalie,
John O'Shea did, and he also
John O'Shea actually played as goalie at one point, and did absolutely smashing at it. So I think having a utility player who could play multiple positions along that back line or just on the field in general is always a good player to have in your back pocket. But I do think, and when it is being rumored, him going on loan to someone like Southampton or Crystal, I think is a perfect move for him. I think he does need a year on loan where he can get prime minutes, because I don't think he's been able to develop as much as he could, because he's been stuck with little game time up in the first team and then playing a lot in the U23s. But he's above the U23 level, so he needs to be going on loan to be getting that, that mid-table to lower Premier League table minutes where he's actually playing week in, week out against Premier League talent.
So on Brandon Williams, it's he's really had 2 seasons, I think, playing for the first team. The season before last, we saw him a lot of the time because Luke Shaw still had his injury issues. He had quite a few injury issues that season, so we saw Brandon Williams a lot at left back. But obviously, since Alex Tellus has come in, Luke Shaw has been revolutionised and improved, and his fitness has been exemplary. So Brandon Williams has not seen any game time at left back, and obviously at right back, again, another player who we'll get onto in a moment, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, is very much one of Ollie's 4 favourites. In other words, the 4 players that Ollie will play every minute that he can, which is Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Bruno Fernandes, Harry Maguire, and Marcus Rashford. Those 4 players amongst the 5, I think, most minutes of any player in Europe last season. Almost towards the end of it, I saw a statistic of. So that's the issue for Brandon Williams. He's never going to find. At least with Alex Tellus, he did get some game time because Ollie did rest Luke Shaw. I think Luke Shaw was all the better for it. But Brandon Williams has found his first team opportunities very limited and blocked because, obviously at left back, when Luke Shaw has a rest, he was always going to go for Alex Tellus. And at right back, like I said, he always plays Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He's one of his favourites. So, he really struggled and got very, very few minutes last season. So as you said, a loan opportunity this season would be beneficial for him, I think, as well. And it's difficult to say really whether he is good enough for Manchester United at this present moment. We just need to see how he matures again because he's still very young. So, and also the other thing, of course, is that now with Delo, who is probably going to be utilised as the backup right back now to Wan-Bissaka this season.
There's no spot for him.
There's going to be no spot for him. And also, if Delo is as good as a lot of respected coaches and professionals and pundits and so forth say that he is, then there's possibly the fact that Brandon Williams will eventually be moved on from the club. Not maybe next year or the year after or so forth, because like I said, we've got a squad that is quite large now, and it's just whether he's going to get enough opportunities. But we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah.
What about Dallo? Conor obviously he's apparently had a good preseason, like by Solskjaer, being kept this season. Even though AC Milan wanted him on loan, no one was wanting to reach the loan fee agreement for Dallo, so he's staying. Do you think he would be? Would you be happy with him in the team if he had replaced Wan-Bissaka?
For me, the first game he played preseason was dreadful. He was the worst player on the pitch our first preseason. And I think you can ask most United fans and they'll agree his first game back with us had a lot of people going, are we sure we really want this kid back? But my hat's off to him. Had a great rest of the preseason. And the issue with Milan wasn't necessarily in the loan fee. What I heard was it was Milan, they wanted a guaranteed to buy. They wanted, if you're going to take him on loan, you are buying him at the end of the year. But they only wanted an option. And so I think United pretty much went, all right, if you only want the option, then you're just not going to get the player, period. We'll just take him. And I don't mind it. We've been begging for a right back up to Wan-Bissaka all of last year. We have now officially dropped our interest in Kieran Trippier, which I wouldn't have minded seeing him come to United and playing at Old Trafford at all. But now that it's been dropped, I think Dallo is a great player to have as that backup right back spot to come in. If heaven forbid Ole goes, yeah, I'm not going to play Wan-Bissaka for one game, especially in these lower cup games. We have a lot of games that we play throughout the year that are against championship and lower sides that there's no reason for us to play our top teams. And we've had to play Wan-Bissaka because there's nobody to go in for him. So I think with Dallo, we have a good player that can go play those games that will give us a chance to rest, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I think deserves to be rested.
Yeah, so Dalot, back from his loan period at AC Milan, featured quite prominently for Portugal as well in the Euros. I think he does. I think offensively, Dalot is a lot better than he is defensively. I think defensively he can be caught out, or he is slightly more suspect. Obviously, especially when you compare him to probably the best one-on-one defender in the world in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. But Dalot, I think it's going to be very good for him to get an opportunity, and I think it is also going to have such a beneficial effect on Wan-Bissaka just for having hopefully a lot less, slightly less game time, because I think even though Aaron Wan-Bissaka are the 14 players that I've mentioned, I think even though Wan-Bissaka probably has the fitness, has better fitness than all of them in terms of his sort of energy levels and being able to run all day and track back, I think some of his performances that were slightly lower down, I think some of them were due to fatigue, and I think Ole unfortunately just won't rest certain players, and Wan-Bissaka's one of those. So it's going to be extremely good for us to see what Dalot is made of. I think also Dalot with that offensive capability is very much going to help and coach and improve Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and also as well put pressure on him. So I'm all for Dalot playing. And then obviously, mentioning Kieran Trippier, I think he would have been a good signing. But not only would Trippier have been a good signing because, he's a good right back, but I think also because Trippier does have good utility as well. As we saw in the Euros for England, he can play left back, and obviously he does, as well as right back. So I think he would have been someone who's good to have as someone who's incredibly flexible, diverse in terms of what he offers us. So Trippier would have been a good signing, but not for the amount of money that Atletico Madrid wanted. And Dalot's a good backup option. The only thing that would convince me as well in terms of not going for Trippier, though, because we spent a couple of weeks deliberating over whether to pay for Trippier, is if Manchester United now use that money that they might have spent on Trippier, as well as some extra money to buy a centre defensive midfielder, or at least a midfielder that's much better than Fred and McTominay. So yeah, as I said, Dalot, very good player, good prospect, and hopefully he's going to get some good game time and give Wan-Bissaka some rotation, much needed.
Right now, we're going to get into some really controversial players. This is where it gets really interesting. We're going to start off with Mr. Victor Lindelof. Supposedly going to be Raphael Varane's replacement Conor. What do you make of Lindelof? Do you rate him? Do you despise him? Do you think he's perfect as a bench player? What do you think?
I don't despise him, and part of me doesn't think he's utter crap, but a big part of me is just tired of seeing his face on the team sheet. Just this dude, he's great one-on-one with someone that has zero pace. But you put him up against someone who's stronger, better in the air, or faster, and he's utterly shite. It's just dreadful watching him play sometimes, especially with Maguire. I mean, you have two not quick defenders next to each other, and you just get somebody like Adama Traore who will literally just run in between the two of them before they can even blink and put a foot out. It's just, I don't want him in the team. I was so happy that we went after and got Varane, and I will say it now, I've said it before, I think we should still be going for another center back so that we can sell Bailly and Lindelof. I would love both. Bailly especially. I'm okay with Lindelof being on the bench because I think there are his passing ability is superb. Diaz has been getting this whole, oh, look at how well he passes the ball from the back. And Lindelof's done that about 3 times a game most of the time. But besides that, fuck off.
So Victor Lindelof, I mean, he was last summer, in fact, a vigilante who helped out some old lady with her handbag, I believe, in Sweden. And he's followed that on with. It's just a shame that in playing ability, he's not a superhero.
Yeah.
I think despise is probably a harsh word, but I really don't like Victor Lindelof. He is one of my least favourite players at Manchester United. I've often called him Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's stepson, because somehow, despite the fact that he and Maguire don't work, and despite his many flaws, Victor Lindelof is somehow always picked by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, which is one of the reasons why I'm Ole Gunnar Solskjaer out, as viewers of this channel will know after many shows, because he keeps picking Victor Lindelof. He's now been made, captain of the Sweden national team, which is, for them, I think, feel is a bit of a travesty that someone of that ilk has been given that honour.
From Zlatan to freaking Lindelof, that's a race.
But Victor Lindelof, incredibly poor player, I would say. I think he's very, very bad. You almost see, I've lost count of the amount of errors and mistakes that he makes during games, key opportunities. It's not even necessarily that he gets bullied by extremely strong players. He's almost bullied by absolutely every player that he comes up against. He's beaten for pace by almost every player that he comes up against. You will recollect, I mean, like I said, off the top of my head, I won't recall absolutely everything that Lindelof did incorrectly, but he was terrible against Crystal Palace in the opening game of the season last season. He was one of the main reasons why we lost that game. He was also, slightly more recently again in the 1-1 draw that we had with West Brom in the spring. He was bullied by, I can't even remember what the name of the forward was that West Brom had, but within a couple of minutes he was bullied in the air by him, and we conceded. He was also bullied against Aston Villa as well on their opening goal and 3-1 victory we had at that point. In the final against Villarreal, he was also the one that got bullied by Gerard Moreno, and who scored obviously Villarreal's opening goal. He was, those are the ones I can think off the top of my head. But in actual fact, if I went through every single one of our games, almost 100% of the time, Victor Lindelof would make a horrible error or mistake that probably should have led to a goal, and almost did on multiple occasions. So, there's very little. As you said, his passing ability is good, but when he's got the pace of a snail, I also think that in actual fact, as you said, his long range passing is good, but because of the way that we're trying to pass out from the back, because Victor Lindelof is so slow, and because he doesn't think quick enough, it also doesn't help us break a press. Whenever teams press us, he's one of the main reasons why we can't get out of the press, because he is incredibly slow, and because he's also extremely risk averse. And that is also something you definitely don't need when you're trying to break a press, is someone who is constantly passing it back to De Gea or Henderson rather than taking a risk. So I don't want to go too much further into Lindelof, but like I said, he is one of. And the other thing is, because, as you sort of said, you don't want to see his face anymore in the lineup. That has also been my feeling, and it's because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer keeps on playing him. despite the fact that almost every single fan has called for Lindelof to be dropped and more of a combination with maybe a faster centre-back next to Harry Maguire. He just keeps on playing him, and that unfortunately has led to my not liking Lindelof as much as I do other players.
You should have said it in the most polite way you possibly can. We're almost sure for Douglas Rogers have a meeting at 6:45, so we'll keep flying. So I'm going to move on to. I'm going to go into the last defensive person. I'm asking this person simply for the crack of it, just for the pure fun of it. Eric Bailly, he was known as a tank, but has he just really made a glass, Conor?
Fucking bellend. You know how you feel about Lindelof. Bailly makes me laugh. Of course, you know, with his nicknames and just how his personality. I love his personality of just how, you know, he is with the club. But that's where my love for Bailly ends. He's not a good defender. He is. We love. I mean, there's like whenever Bailly plays, there's a whole thing of how long is it until he does something that a center back should not be doing. Because it's like once or twice a game that he'll do like a stupid step over in the box, or he'll do like Cruyff's turn, like right outside the 18-yard box, and you're just sitting there going, "What are you doing? Pass the ball!" And that's when he plays, because, you know, he's made of glass. We've seen this dude comes back from a 3-month injury and then gets in a car accident just off the grounds and is out for another month and a half. You can't make it up. He literally manages to come back from an injury in his second day back in training, where we were about to announce that he was back healthy. He gets into an accident in his car right outside Carrington and is gone from the lineup again. You cannot rely on this guy to stay healthy. And barring just his playing style and his not being healthy, his family's a bunch of fucking, you know, I'm trying to hold my words and not curse too much, but they're a bunch of fucking, you know, they're like Pogba's family and his agent. They love to talk the most crap. We saw it happen before he was given his new contract, Georgia, you probably remember. His brother's like, yeah, he wants to leave. He should leave. United is disrespecting him. He should leave. Father was saying the same crap. My thing is, as a player, if you do not have the respect enough for a club to tell your agent or your family to keep their mouth shut, or your wife or whoever, because that was my bone to pick with Romero, was his wife needed to keep her mouth shut. You do not let your family or your agent talk crap about the club that you play for. That is the stupidest thing you could do as a player. That is the easiest way to find yourself out in your butt. So, if Bailly gets sold tomorrow, I won't shed any tears.
So I think this is probably the only player. Well, there'll probably be other ones as well, but I think this is the player that we probably most disagree about that we've discussed so far. Obviously the injury concerns that you've said, I think that's undoubted. The fact that he can't stay fit, unfortunately, that has always been Eric Bailly's issue. Is that, yeah, it always seems to be Eric Bailly that does unfortunately get injured. But in terms of, I just really, really like Eric Bailly when he plays. I think that we play a much higher line when Eric Bailly plays because he does have that speed. I think Harry Maguire actually himself prefers playing with Eric Bailly because he knows that he can then be slightly more adventurous with the ball when he comes out with Harry Maguire. But not only that, but also that he can be more tenacious when he goes into a player, you know, and not fear that he'll get spun and obviously go in behind. And there are multiple occasions when Bailly does play where, you know, against a quick set, you know, that sort of situation that we've talked about where a quick forward does spin Harry Maguire, where Eric Bailly, you just know that no one's going to win a race against Eric Bailly in that, you know, of the forward. And there's countless times where he does come across and he's like an avenging angel. And like I said, I really do love Eric Bailly when he plays. I wanted him to play with Harry Maguire, you know, because, you know, mainly because of what I feel for Victor Lindelof, almost like all of last season. And I also feel like there was a period where Victor Lindelof got injured, if you remember, back in December of last season, and Eric Bailly came in. And in those games, we played much better football. We played much further up. We got far more clean sheets as well in those games. And that was because Eric Bailly, you know, all those sort of like weaknesses that Harry Maguire has, and, you know, Rafael Varane is certainly going to help much even more than that, isn't he? In terms of what Harry Maguire's weaknesses are, which we all know about. And I think Eric Bailly was able to do that. I think he was much better suited for me in terms of a partnership with Harry Maguire. And it was just very unfortunate that I think Eric Bailly just can't stay fit. But not only that, is the fact that Eric Bailly was fit, but as soon as Victor Lindelof came back in January, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saw his stepson and thought, I'm going to play him instead. That is unfortunate.
I agree with you. That I love his playing ability. I think he's a great defender. I can't get past the injuries because he can't stay healthy, and I hate players that let, like I said, when you let family diss the club and you don't even speak on it, I lose a lot of respect for you as a person because you play for the club. I don't care what's going on behind the scenes. You play for the club. You see it with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as manager, and of course, George, I know your feelings on him. But we've heard from plenty of players that behind the scenes, he will hairdryer treatment tons of players. He is not afraid to absolutely blast any player, no matter who they are, for how they're playing or what they're doing. But when it comes to going and talking with the press and talking with the journalists, he refuses to say anything bad. He is very good at talking his way around situations. And so when I see players like Pogba and like Eric Bailly and like Romero who let their family talk shit and let their family say stuff about the club, it automatically, my respect for them as a person lessens and my want for them to be at the club lessens.
That's fair enough. So next one is Martial, obviously making his return from injury. Very good first season, very dodgy second season before his injury. Conor, do you think he could play a crucial part for Man United?
I hope so. We talk about players in certain times of their career wishing they were like that. I'm hoping he comes back to post NHS Martial because last season he was absolutely dreadful. And honestly, if he has another season like last year where Scott McTominay's level equal with him on goals, which is frightening. A guy who played in a double pivot last year, all year, McTominay scored 7 goals. And so did Martial, a striker. That's dreadful. If he has another season, he's gone. I absolutely want him off this team. But if he can improve and play better and score more goals, and actually, especially with Rashford's injury and him being out for this first part of the year, then I'm fine to keep him. I think he's a left winger. I don't think he's a striker. I think you rotate him and Rashford on that left side, but I don't think he's a striker.
So on Anthony Martial, he's very much one of the most divisive players, I feel like, for the fan base. Maybe Paul Pogba was probably the ultimate one, but Anthony Martial's definitely up there. He's had a very up and down journey and career with Manchester United ever since he joined. He had an exemplary first season under Louis van Gaal, but then he has had some issues, off the field issues, and also unhappiness about the fact that he's been replaced or undermined, maybe possibly in his eyes, by signings of various strikers during his time at Manchester United. So he initially had Zlatan Ibrahimovic, then he had Romelu Lukaku, and latterly he's now had Edison Cavani. So I feel like his nose has been slightly put out of joint, but you want to see a player who does have a greater mentality and a greater strength and fortitude to try and fight for his place. Last season, as you said, he was very poor in front of goal. There were some very crucial matches where we missed out on points and so forth. I think against PSG when we lost, in the penultimate game of the group stages last season, there was a golden opportunity here he had to score. And there was other opportunities as well, to which he didn't take. But we did have, I think he was player of the season prior to that, and he came back obviously after the lockdown in phenomenal form. And what I would say about Anthony Martial is he is one of those players that I like in respect to his footballing intelligence. I feel like he is one of our cleverer players on the ball, so he's better. He's got very good decision making. he just seems to see the game in a better way, in the same way as, for example, like obviously I'm a big fan of Paul Pogba. He sees the game like Paul Pogba or Edison Cavani or Nemanja Matic. What I like about those players, just there are probably others as well, but there are fewer than I would like in our club, of players who know when to pass a ball, know how to pass it, all these different, little, just very small things that make you a much better player than someone who doesn't know how to make that decision making correctly. So I'm hopeful that Anthony Martial is going to do well. And as you said, Marcus Rashford is out for a couple of months, and Martial probably will see a bit more game time, on the left. But I think the issue is that, speaking about Martial's temperament and his own opinion of himself, is that he feels like he's a centre forward. He really, he obviously with that, number 9 jersey and all the ways that he sort of tried to cling on to it, he feels like he's a centre forward, and he is a very good centre forward, I think, when he's on his game, as we saw after lockdown the season before last. And it's just, we're hopeful he can rediscover his form. But like I said, it's he's now 25 years old, so he's no longer a young player. He's almost into his sort of prime years now. So we're going to have to see a much more consistent Anthony Martial. And the other thing is that, as my final point, is that he does need to shed off some of these injuries, because almost every season without fail, Anthony Martial has a layoff for a couple of months or so, which does disrupt us, unfortunately. And yeah, so we're going to have to see him, shake off that, and hopefully, in the same way as Luke Shaw has done with his injury issues. And yeah, the more often we can see Anthony Martial, I think the better he'll play, and I am very hopeful that he will do.
He reminds me of Memphis Depay, kind of, when he was with us, with his kind of like his ego of himself. And even Depay has now admitted that his personality and his thoughts on himself was not what he should have been doing when he was here. And I think it's kind of the same with Martial, like you said, with that center forward position. He wants to be it so bad, but he's just not.
All right, so we'll go 2 more players to talk about, because Conor has to go in 20 minutes. So I'll there's no point also talking about Bruno. We all know what your opinions are about Bruno, Cavani, Greenwood, Rashford, etc. So the next one is Fred. Decent. If Solskjaer does play a 4-3-3, would you trust Fred as your alone sit-in DM, Conor?
Fred, chuck him on his head. I can't stand Fred. I don't want him. I love, again, he's kind of like Bayou, where I love his person, the Pastor Fred personality. I absolutely think it's one of the funniest things ever, him being Pastor Fred, and I think he's a great personality. I don't like him. I don't like him in the team at all. If you are going to be a midfielder for United, you need to be able to do 2 things. You need to pass. You need to shoot. You can't pass, and he's got even his coach laughing at him for shooting. If you can't do either of those things well at all, I don't want to see you anywhere near the club. That's one of the reasons why I still think McTominay is far and above the better midfielder than Fred. Because of the fact that Scott has ability to go up in the air and get, and grab a ball in the air and score. He's got the ability to score from outside the 18-yard box, which he did plenty of times last year. And I think he's also a better passer than Fred. I just there's not much. He's kind of like Lindelof. There's not much. I think he's got one thing he does really well, but besides that, there's not much that he does well, and I don't like him. I don't want him in the club.
Yeah, so Fred, let me think how I can. So, yeah, I think Fred is one of my least favourite players again. Again, we see him far too often. I almost feel like, of the players that play regularly in our team, he is the worst. This is because, again, sort of, piggybacking slightly in terms of what I spoke about Anthony Martial in terms of footballing intelligence. Fred's is the lowest of all the players that play regularly. His decision making is very, very poor in game. He often makes silly errors or mistakes. There was the moment against Leicester when we lost in the FA Cup. There was the moment against Roma in the second leg where he just was sort of dilly-dallying and thought that he was Neymar, and that's when they scored their second goal. There are other sort of moments as well. There was the incident against PSG when he obviously he did incorrectly get sent off in that game, in that penultimate game, but the stupidity of what he did that should have got sent off. I'm not quite sure how the referee didn't send him off and just gave him a yellow card in that match. As I said, it's and then you sort of go on to, as you said, the passing and the shooting. Fred's issue as well is that he doesn't have a very good first touch. He's probably the worst in the side. In fact, probably the worst at the club in terms
Reminds
of
me
his
of
first
Lukaku
touch.
with that crappy first touch.
Yeah, his touch is terrible. The main key ingredients of football are being able to touch the ball, pass it, and move. Unfortunately, in two of those aspects, obviously the passing and the first touch, Fred is probably the worst at the club. And he's just, and what I would also go even further to say is I think, Alexis Sanchez was terrible in terms of the wages we put him on, but at least we got him for free. Whereas Fred, I think we paid about 53 million for. And that was a few years ago as well. So, in terms of inflation, that makes that even worse a fee to actually have paid for him. So, as I said, Fred is probably, in my own opinion, again, is the worst piece of business that we've done over the last few years. I'm not quite sure why we paid 53 million for him. And again, I've been relatively harsh, so I don't want to go too much further into it, but I really don't like Fred. And you are right, I do rate McTominay higher than Fred, but not by much. Again, because I feel like McTominay, as I said, I really do rate highly players who are very clever on the ball, and McTominay is slightly cleverer than Fred, but not clever enough, I feel like, to be Manchester United.
He's still got a ways, but he's younger than. That's the thing as well for me, is that he's younger than Fred. So I think, like you said with Henderson, he's got that time to learn. Fred, I think it's funny because Fred, one of his skills getting brought into the club was he could hit free kicks. Not many people know that he's actually a very, very apt free kick taker, and yet we have not used him once. We've used him to threaten that we're going to use him. We've threatened that we're going to use him by putting him alongside Bruno for a free kick, but everybody and their mother and their blind grandma knows that Bruno's going to be the one striking the ball.
Yeah, it's hopefully Fred gone very soon, but we're certainly going to make a loss on him because no one is paying 53 million or higher for him.
The last person I'm going to ask you guys about is Matic. Conor, where do you see Matic in this Manchester United team?
See, I rate Matic very highly. Going into last year, I did not. I thought he was a player whose legs could only have him playing once a week. He's too old. He wasn't quick enough. But the more I've watched him play last year, and especially now again in the preseason, it's preseason, but it still kind of does show a little bit, especially against Everton. Matic and Van de Beek was the best midfielder pairing we had when we played Everton, and that showed in how well we played that first half. He's a great player. I mean, I've said it now going into the season. If we can't get a defensive midfielder, just rotate Garner and Matic. In all honesty, I don't think Matic is an awful option. I don't think he can play every week. And yes, I would much rather bring in another defensive midfielder to play ahead of him and then just send Garner on loan. But Matic is a good player. He's maybe past his Chelsea peak, and we all know how brilliant he was at Chelsea. But he's not finished. He's still a decent player in my eyes.
So again, Nemanja Matic is one of my favourite players that we have currently on our books. I feel like, for the third time I'm sort of going to speak about footballing intelligence, I feel like Matic is one of, if not the most intelligent player that we have in a footballing sense. He just sees the game so well. He reads the game exceptionally. His passing range is also brilliant. He knows, it's not just the actual ability to pass, but it's also the way he passes the ball. So it's almost like it's perfectly for a player, which is something you do see very rarely. And he always seems like he's in the right place at the right time. He intercepts as well, and he also dictates a game exceptionally well from the base of the base of the midfield. As you said, he was also brilliant post lockdown, a bit like Anthony Martial. I think him and Pogba coming back, I think they were very much the difference makers in terms of when we went on that massive run of wins that eventually got us top 4 in the season prior to last one. And I think Ollie should have used him a lot more last season.
I think him, Pogba, and Bruno in the midfield is our ideal midfield if we can't get a defensive midfielder.
Yeah, 100%. But he, as I said, I'm a massive fan of Matic. I also like the way that when he plays, that he always, because of as what we've spoken about in terms of Maguire and Lindelof, and they can't necessarily pass the ball out very well when they're pressed. I also like the fact that Matic will drop deeper than both of them and be an option for them to pass to, make a simple pass and then pass it out through the, through the lines. And that's, Matic is, it's so reassuring having Nemanja Matic play. Not only because of what Fred and McTominay are like, but also because Matic just is so calm and composed on the ball. He's such a silky player. He really is amazing. The only issue we have with Matic is his age and obviously whether he can play often. But I would definitely be playing Matic at least once a week, because I feel like he can do that. I think
I wish he was 5 years younger.
Yeah, he is. I
he was with us, so
yeah.
Yeah, no, with Matic, and I'll pull a George here and bring up. I can't bring up the exact game, but I remember there was a goal we scored where literally everybody went, "Look at Matic." The whole reason we scored the goal was, I think it was a ball from like the left back, and he just took the ball, didn't even take a touch, one touched it, and just kept it going. And it was a perfect pass. Yeah, and it was perfect. It literally could not have been a more perfect pass. And it was, he barely even looked. He didn't take a touch before hitting it, and it was pinpoint. So I think
the one eventually where Greenwood got it and crossed it, and then Bruno came in at the far post.
Bruno came in and just smashed the ever-loving crap out of it. No, yeah. I think Matic, I agree with you. Matic is, I think, our smartest player. I mean, he sees the ball. He sees the entire field like a goalie would. He's got that range of vision where it's like he's the goalie, that he's got that range of vision of seeing everywhere. I wasn't big on Matic for a while, but the more and more I see him play, I love his personality. I like guys that bring in a sort of personality to the club, and that's why there's a lot of players I've liked on the team because I like the personality they bring. Matic brings playing ability, and that he's just joking around constantly. Always seems to be that guy that every single player gets along with. We see it all over social media. He's that old head who just is hip with the youngsters, and it's just a joy to have around the club. I don't want him going anywhere anytime soon. I know I've set up points that I'd love to see him sold, and I know there's a lot of people who are calling for him to be sold if we bring in a defensive midfielder. But the more and more I've thought about it and had time to really look at him, I don't want him going anywhere anytime soon.
Matic is, I think for me, Matic definitely up there with, I think, our three most intelligent players off the top of my head are footballing wise, and probably Matic, Mata, and Pogba. And a lot of people, as I said, Pogba's quite a divisive player. But again, I think he sees things that, some of the passes that Pogba plays, just sees things that no one else would even, dare attempt. And we saw, just on Pogba very quickly, we saw in the Euros when France went out that Pogba was literally playing in Mbappe absolutely every single time with passes that no one else almost in the world would be able to play. And I think Matic, like I said, is just such an intelligent player in that respect, and it's just a pleasure to watch him. But I don't feel like, again, we obviously won't have enough time to speak about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer properly, but I feel like he won't use Matic enough.
I hope he does. I hope he smartens up. I will say about Mata, because you said about Pogba, this is going to make Josh's heart happy. I wish we have the Mata and Matic from when they were at Chelsea, because both of them were absolute destroyers and unplayable when they played for Chelsea. And they've come to us, and now they've gotten a lot older and aren't near. They're still, again, Mata's another player where people, when we re-signed him for a year deal, were like, why have we re-signed him for? I was like, yes, good. Great job. Because not only are we waiting for him to his coaching badge, when he plays, he still scores. He scored a goal for us last year. I think Mata and Matic are two players who, because they are, like you said, in that 35, 34-year-old range, you get a lot of the FIFA Twitter guys who say they're past their best. Well, yeah, they're past their best. They're in their mid-30s. That doesn't mean they're shite. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be playing them.
I think both Mata and Matic have been very good for us. Again, I think, obviously they were very good for Chelsea, but I think also they've been very good for us. It's just the issue is that now is that they're, and I feel most sorry for Mata, because I feel like because he was very young when he left Chelsea, and I feel like a lot of his prime was wasted on Manchester United. A bit like there are a few players that I feel like that with, and I feel like that with De Gea, as you spoke about, very loyal servant, obviously barring the Real Madrid thing, the fax machine. But David De Gea, I feel like Juan Mata and Paul Pogba, I feel like those three players, a lot of their prime has been wasted during the last few years at Manchester United. Yeah. And I feel like Juan Mata was very good for us. It's just an issue was that when he was in his prime a few years ago, a lot of, obviously Rooney was past it, or sorry, Rooney wasn't as good as he was. He very much had probably one of the steepest declines you ever like to see from a footballer. And we just didn't have the team to properly challenge. So it's very unfortunate for Mata. I feel like that now, as we're getting a much better team, with Varane and Sancho, is that he's missed the boat in terms of his career.
All right, so that brings the end to the Golden Show. And that's actually only 1 hour. So we actually did very, very well. It was obviously spoken with all the controversial Man United players. There was fascinating different opinions between these two. You agree with some, you disagree with others. That's the whole point of it. So if you guys are interested to check in, no point in checking George's too, just how George appears on the show. So you want to see George, he's on my channel, Doug's channel, obviously here on the Golden Show. If you want to see Conor, he's on the Red, White and Blue Show. He's actually recording an episode in 2 hours' time from now. He's there every week. There's going to be a very exciting NFL predictions coming out, Conor, where me and you're going to be going head to head. Now, obviously, I mean, it's nothing to George whatsoever, but he'll just nod on his support anyway. Conor, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Keep checking out the Blue Podcast. I've been so happy and so thankful to be invited to be able to join this great group. So I'm really happy that I've been able to do what I've done. It is a rumor right now, and I'm going to keep it at a rumor. There's rumors between me and the boss of a potential new show that me and him are scheming up together behind the scenes.
And then, George, anything you'd like to add as the co-host?
No, it's as Conor sort of mentioned. If you are new and you are watching, do remember to like, share, and subscribe. I think the Blue Podcast is going from strength to strength. And we'd be delighted for you to join the channel and keep on watching. And thank you very much, Conor, as well, for joining us on this show and listening to me, which Josh often has to do every single week. But you're lucky you have to do it once a week. We're going to do it this once. But thank you very much for joining. And it was very interesting to hear your opinions on Manchester United.
It's another convenience that the Blue Podcast goes strength to strength whenever I'm hard to step in the head. Just but anyway, that does bring the end to it. Thank you very much for joining. We will be back next Friday with the next episode, and the Premier League, La Liga, the Bundesliga and Serie A all begin. So a very, very intriguing time from next week onwards. Will George still be still sure out? And will Conor even be able to come onto the show if Eric Bailly did not make a massive mistake? Only time will tell next week on The Golden Show.
Why do you let us
hurt one another just for the dollar? Did you lose your heart in the darkness deep in your pocket? No, I don't care of the price I pay. I don't want to spend my life that way. Tell me, is the pain that you're causing worth what you profit?
Yeah, I know that money don't buy happiness, but buys you more material shit. Been reworking how I think and what it means to be rich. I used to think it meant to flex, so Rolex on my wrist. Feels bad to take more than you give. Lately hate how we live. I never want to become the things that I hate. With a man in the mirror with laugh and spit in my face and tell me that the money is maybe another fake. I've been drowning in my mind and my money's been adding weight. Oh Lord, please save me. I should've known that something man-made couldn't make me. I say I'm making music, or is music what creates me? I never have an answer, same question every day. See, when we pass on, all our things are passed on to the next. Everything we didn't do is everything we regret. Every day we fucking work for this worthless check. If you're not happy, you're forever in debt. You're forever in debt.